Welcome back. I did a video earlier. I have one more, this one now to do. It's June 11th, 2025. Thanks for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. This video is going to be about the Iran, Israel, and American issue. And I'm going to start with this particular article right here. To get started, are Israeli-American relations losing their special status? Okay, so the phone call between U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu 2 nights ago was described by most Israeli media outlets as favorable, particularly regarding the Iranian issue. It did not, however, dispel the prevailing impression in Israel that there is a negative change in America's Middle East strategy, notably toward the occupying state. This impression, which extends to circles close to the government, stems primarily from the collapse of a long-held assumption that the U.S. administration will always stand by Israel and perhaps even be in its pocket. This impression has formed after a series of unilateral steps taken by the Trump administration without consulting or obtaining Israel's approval. These steps specifically include the agreement signed by the Trump administration with the Houthis in Yemen, which did not impose a red light on the continued firing of missiles at Israel, the embrace of what Israel describes as former Islamists in Syria, the embrace of Turkey and Qatar, and the rush to reach an agreement with Iran, which, according to most Israeli readings, would allow it to almost completely maintain its nuclear program. Regarding the war on Gaza, there is a near consensus that the U.S. administration's deep disappointment with Israel's conduct in the context of this war is a common factor linking all these steps. According to more than one Israeli bilateral relations expert, these steps prove, first and foremost, that President Trump has no regard for Israeli interests. Well, I'm glad to hear that, personally, but in his view, American interests and his interests are paramount, which is common sense. If you are living in America, you're going to be concerned about America's interests and what's best for it. Secondly, the U.S. president has traditionally delivered messages to Israel directly, sometimes sharply, and without any restraint. However, Trump has chosen a new method of indirectly delivering messages to his Israeli ally. This includes unwritten means and taking or refraining from taking steps rather than clear and direct statements. Now, Trump said to have told Netanyahu to end Gaza war now. An example of this is when Netanyahu was surprised to hear about the launch of diplomatic dialogue between Washington and Tehran without having any prior knowledge of this process, which was being conducted behind his back despite it being a top priority for him. Yes, and when I saw that, I was like, good, good. We shouldn't need their permission. This was only the beginning of a series of additional steps that did not include any direct public criticism from the White House, but did serve as a serious indication of the declining status of what are described as a special or exceptional relationship between the two countries. Yes, which needs to end, in my opinion. In this regard, it is worth noting specifically that Trump's decision not to visit Israel during his tour of the Gulf states is a clear indication that the special relationship between the two parties is losing its spark and exclusivity. Naturally, there are multiple suggestions on how Israel should deal with this change. We have found that there are two main approaches. First, the need to examine and understand the root reasons for this change by the Americans, rather than simply saying this is part of President Trump's nature and temperament. Some who hold this view openly call for examining the limitations of Israel's power in front of the U.S. According to the position of the Institute for National Security Studies at Tel Aviv University, now is not the appropriate time, nor is Trump the appropriate president to create a crisis initiated by Israel. A crisis like this might offer some advantages over a normal American administration, but it's an uncalculated risk for an administration like Trump's. The second approach, embraced by the government's mouthpieces and its prime minister, is that the last thing Israel needs is to surrender and concede. This argument is that Israel hasn't always relied on the Americans to ensure its security, as during the first 2 decades of its existence, the U.S. did not stand by its side, or did it provide it with weapons or economic aid or support it diplomatically. Okay, so, of course, all the analysts I listen to say Israel wouldn't be able to do anything militarily with any type of weapons without our assistance, because we're the ones that have been giving them all the weapons. And yeah, which I wish we would stop doing, and wish we had stopped doing this decades ago. But in any case, so we know where Trump stands basically on this. Although he did a interview the other day. Oh, I can't understand why Iran is dragging their feet for this deal, and I'm not feeling much confidence over this anymore. And they seem to not want to do this deal, and I don't know, they've changed. Either he's saying this in a soft manner, when he really knows that Iran is not going to give up enriching uranium for power for their communities, and infrastructure, and for the hospitals and the isotopes used, and for cancer treatment and all that. That is a no-go. As some people say, it's a red line. They aren't going to give that up, and they shouldn't have to, in my opinion. So, and again, as I heard today, Trump and we haven't heard from Witkoff anymore. I think he's done all he can do, and he's pretty much out and done what he can do, and he's not in this process anymore. But yeah, they were all fine with Iran having 3-point-something% uranium, using that for their power plants and things like that. But every time they would say that those neocons and Zionists and people who want warmongers, would flip it and say, no, we can't have any. So it's been this flip-flopping, almost like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing going on. And we realize it's just the inner struggle of the Trump administration because of this. We know personally, through the analysts McGregor and others have said, President Trump doesn't want a war with Iran, and it doesn't want a war with Russia. But how much control he has, I wouldn't say too much. So with that information, I want to take you to another important article out of it's actually Reuters and New York Times, but I'll just go ahead and read the New York Times one. U.S. to withdraw diplomats from Iraq amid Iran tensions. So basically, it's this some of the staff at the embassy in Iraq. Okay, so the State Department said it had decided to shrink the U.S. footprint in Baghdad, and the United Kingdom issued a warning about increased tensions within the region. The State Department has decided to reduce its diplomatic presence in Iraq, the department said in a statement on Wednesday, as tensions across the Middle East spiked amid signs that nuclear diplomacy between the United States and Iran may be deadlocked. Work of the U.S. decision, along with a warning from the United Kingdom about new threats to Middle East commercial shipping, came hours after President Trump said in a podcast released Wednesday that he has grown less confident about the prospects for a deal with Iran that would limit its ability to develop nuclear weapons. As I said, American and Iranian negotiators have been planning to meet later this week for another round of talks, although Mr. Trump told reporters on Monday that Iran had adopted an unacceptable negotiating position. Yes, see, it's unacceptable because of those who want Iran to have no enrichment whatsoever. And they ask for things that are impossible for Iran to agree with, okay? I'm going to go to the Reuters article for a second. U.S. preparing to partially evacuate Iraq embassy over regional security risks, sources say. Okay, so the United States is preparing a partial evacuation of its Iraqi embassy and will allow military dependents to leave locations around the Middle East due to heightened security risks in the region. The 4 U.S. and 2 Iraqi sources did not specify which security risk had prompted the decision, and reports of the potential evacuation pushed up oil prices by more than 4%. Later on, we'll see that it also says a U.S. official said the State Department had authorized voluntary departures from Bahrain and Kuwait. Okay, the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait said in a statement earlier on Wednesday that it has not changed its staffing position and remains fully operational. So, partial evacuations mostly are in Baghdad. However, let's see, the United States has a military presence across the major oil producing region with bases in Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates. I had no idea that we had that many bases there. I mean, I've seen like pictures on the map, but it's ridiculous how many we have. But it says U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has authorized the voluntary departure of military dependents from locations in the Middle East, a U.S. official said. Another U.S. official said that was mostly relevant to family members located in Bahrain, where the bulk of them are based. Okay, so Bahrain, in that instance. The State Department is said to have an ordered departure for the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. The intent is to do it through commercial means, but the U.S. military is standing by if help is requested. So, yeah, the base in Baghdad is pretty big. And then another U.S. official said there were no change in operations at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, and that no evacuation order had been issued for employees or families linked to the U.S. Embassy in Qatar, which was operating as usual. Okay, so let's just... they did bring up the... Earlier on Wednesday, Britain's maritime agency warned that increased tensions in the Middle East may lead to an escalation in military activity that could impact shipping in critical waterways. It advised vessels to use caution while traveling through the Gulf of Oman, and the Straits of Hormuz, which all border Iran. Okay, why do you think this is happening? Why do you think that not that they've never done evacuations in embassies before at certain times in our history over there, but we know that President Trump is feeling not confident with the talks with Iran, because Iran actually, heaven forbid, they want to use their power plants and to help their communities with power, with hospitals, with the all the things I said. So, it sounds to me like they're preparing. Now, apparently they're not taking any of the military, they're not closing down any of the bases or taking any of the military out of there. But we do know that Iran said that they will strike, if they are striked, if they are hit by Israel and with the help of America, the American bases will be hit in the Middle East area there, around Iran. So they're evacuating some of the staff from some of these bases, at the embassies in some of these bases. Okay, well, it just seems imminent that this attack is coming, and of course that's what the prophecies say. Attack is imminent. Just another, everything seems to be unfolding. That's the only reason I bring these things up, is because, if things like this weren't happening, that didn't line up with what was prophesized, then I probably wouldn't be, emphasizing this so much on the prophecies, but they're happening. So we'll see what happens. Could be nothing. Could be months, year, whatever, before this war happens. Don't know. But things seem to be marching in that direction for sure. Thanks so much for watching. Please follow my channel, like my videos if you like them. Follow me on my channel, my Rumble channel. Follow me on my Rumble channel. Follow me on, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Share your thoughts. Always appreciate that. Thank you for your support. Until next time.